And we are live. Okay. Tonight, we learned for three individuals, Benosaf, to in addition to all the psuim, the injured, and all the chatufim, all the kidnapped victims. First one is Chaim Mer Dova Kohen Ben Yenta. He should have refuah shlema, Dov Katz. Second is Natan Shimon Chaim Ben Valerie Akira. That is, and thank God he's doing better, is Natan Emergi, who was injured, shrapnel into his stomach. He had surgery today, and thank God he is stable. He's alert. His father's told me that he's completely remembers everything. It was this morning. And finally, Le'ilu Nishmat Bela Bat Ze'evov, Zifrona Livracha, Mark Kishel's mother. Tonight is the yard site, and the Shama should have an aliyah. And by the way, in general, anytime you have a yard site or something else, someone needs a refuah shlema, you want the class in so-and-so's name, please feel free to just message me and let me know. Okay. What we left off with last week, just a second, I just do something backwards here. Hold on 1 second. Let me see. Yeah. Okay. Tried out. I actually thought I was going to outsmart myself and do something. Yeah. Okay, whatever. It's fine. Just got my notes a little mixed up. If you just get myself squared away for a second. That would be this, I think. Yeah. Okay. I'm back. Okay. So when we left off last week, I was leaving with kind of an open question. We talked about the fact that to Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, that the revelation of Hashem or their first encounter or something had a different location for each one. I just want to put it on the screen so it can remind everybody. We said that with Avraham, it was a mountain. It was Har HaMoriah, which eventually becomes the Temple Mount. Yitzchak was a field. It says, "Vayetzei Yitzchak lasuach basadeh." Yitzchak went out to the field to commune with Hashem. And Yaakov, when he has his dream at the beginning of Parshat Vayetzei, he wakes up. It says, "Vayikatz Yaakov mishenato, vayomer ein zekim bet manorah makom hazeh." How awesome is this place? Ein zekim bet Elokim v'zeh shara shamayim. This is the house of God. This is the gateway to heaven. So he refers to it as the Bet Elokim, a house of God. So you have a mountain, a field, and then a house. Those are three different revelations of Hashem, or the first awakenings, or whatever you want to use the term. Because technically, when Hashem says, the beginning of Parshat Lech Lecha, and says that Hashem says to Avram, Lech Lecha me'artzecha me'oladetcha, it's not necessarily the first Hitgalut, or the first revelation to Avraham Avinu. In any case, so the question is, what's the significance here? I guess you can make a whole shear out of this, old Torah out of it. I'm not going to, because I think it could be boring, to be honest with you. But I think it's one general idea here is that it's three. Remember, we talked about the fact that each one had a different relationship with Hashem. Each one represented a different type of life, or part of life. Where things are great and sunny. Some things where things are just so, and times when things are dark. That's Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov. And there's many, many other metaphors and things we could use. But I think also this is different ways in which we might relate to Hashem, or how we relate in general to Judaism. I'll explain what I mean. When you're on a mountain, you have the ability to see far, but people can also see you. It's a very open, very exposed type of a place. And that's like representing the public sphere. How you act relating to Hashem is one way. The second one is a field. Now, the field is, generally speaking, is flat, although it doesn't have to be, but generally speaking is flat. And in theory, those people that are there, they could see you from a distance. So those, any of you who do have done any picking of vegetables or fruits, or helping any farmers this season, which I know that since October 7th, a number of you have, you can stand at one part of a field, unless you're talking trees, and you can see a very far distance and see each other. But it's not the same as a mountain. So it's less public and less pronounced and more enclosed, but still a little bit more of an exposed a little bit. Then again, how one would act relative to God. And then finally, you have the house in your private home. And we will say, and the message I think partially is, this is my opinion, but it doesn't mean it's 100% accurate, is that it's not just representative of the relationship between Hashem and Abraham and Yitzchak and Yaakov, but also how we relate to Judaism in general and to Hashem. When we're completely exposed, I mean that in quotes, like we're out in the public sphere that everyone can see us and we can see everybody. We may act one way relative to Hashem, or less exposed, maybe in a more private environment, but not inside a house. Maybe less so. And when we're by ourselves in the house, it's a different story. We have to make sure that in each one of those we relate to Hashem in the proper, appropriate way. Okay. So what I want to do is I want to go put back on the screen now the bracha that we're in the middle of. I think that between this week and next week, we'll probably get through this first bracha. We'll see. I'm going to make this a little bigger. And we've talked about already the first part. Now you come with a list of different things. We're going to focus first on the thing that I highlighted. Then we're going to go back and pick up a whole bunch of other stuff. But let's just take a look at the words. We refer to Hashem as Hakel, Hagadol, Hagibor, Hanora, Kel Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, Konei Hakol, Zocher Chasdei Avot, Mevigo Alivnei V'Nehen Naman Shemo B'Yava. Let's look at the English. He's the great, the powerful, the awesome, most high, almighty. That's the one we're going to come back to. Who bestows beneficent kindness, who possesses everything, who remembers the piety of the patriarchs, and who brings a redeemer to their children for the sake of his name with love. Okay, there's a lot to unpack here, obviously. But right now, first I'm going to focus on these two words that I highlighted. We know that we've talked in various parts in Tefilla, in Piyutim, in song. We use the word El. We talked about that many times. Gadol is used a lot. Gibor is used a lot. Norah is used a lot. Almost everything here. The Gomel Chasadim Tovim, Konei Hakol. We say that Hashem is we have it in Shabbat morning davening. The concept of Chasdei Avot, the Chasadim that our forefathers did. We talk about that in Mincha and Shabbat also. Concept of Geula. So there's nothing really here out of the ordinary. The question could be like, why these lists? Why these specific attributes of God or titles? But the one that really is bolet, or is very much sticks out, is the title Kel Elyon. El Elyon means the Most High Almighty. So what's it come from? Where is it? So it really only appears one time in Tanakh, if I remember right. And that is in this particular story here. Let me bring this down a bit. Rabbit, drop it down. There we go. Okay. Abraham had returned. There was a battle between the 4 kings and the 5 kings. By the way, I can learn that narrative 100 times. I still never remember if the 4 were the good ones or the 5 were the bad ones, or vice versa. And you can tell it to me now, and I can look it up now, and I'll forget it tomorrow. There's certain things that are just a block in my head, and that's one of them. In any case, it's not about this. It has nothing to do with the kings right now, but it happens to do that after this battle, this war is over. And remember, his Lot was taken captive and all these other things. There's a meeting between a man named Melchizedek, who was the king of Shalem, and Abraham. Now, parenthetically, Shalem is there are 2 halves of the name of Jerusalem. One day we'll talk about this. Yerushalayim has, I think, 70 names. We know it is Yerushalayim. There's the word Yir'ah and Shalem. Those are the two words that combine to make the word Yerushalayim. And the Melech Shalem is Salem. And what is Salem? It's short for, we say now, for Jerusalem, right? Right. So Salem, Massachusetts, and all it got its name from being a shortened version of Jerusalem, Shalem. Anyways, so here there's a discussion or an action that takes place between Melchizedek, the king of Shalem. It says, Melchizedek Melech Shalem hotzi lechem v'yayin. King Melchizedek of Shalem brought out bread and wine. And he was a priest of God Most High. Now, you'll notice in the English that the word God is capitalized, and we're going to keep it that way for now. He blessed, and it says in Hebrew, Vayomar, and he blessed him, saying, Baruch Avraham El Elyon, Konei Shamayim Ba'aretz. Blessed be Avraham of God Most High, creator of heaven and earth. Now, you notice the words Konei Shamayim Ba'aretz also, which is interesting, which change in the Shemona Esray to Konei Hakol. We'll get to it. Baruch El Elyon, and also blessed is the God Most High, Shemigen Tzarecha B'yadecha, who delivered your foes into your hand. Vayiten lo maaser mikol. And Avram gave Melchizedek 10%. He gave him maaser, as we say. He gave him 10% of all the stuff he was given, the wine, the bread, everything. He gave maaser. So what's going on here? First of all, who was Melchizedek? He was not Jewish. The Midrash tells us that he was more than likely Shem, one of the sons of Noach. And it's interesting when I learned, especially with kids, when we talk about like Adam and Noach and his kids, I say they weren't Jewish. They say, wow, how can that be? Of course they're Jewish. Avram is the first Jew. Before them, they were the Sheva Mitzvot B'nai Noach and everything of that nature. But Noach wasn't Jewish, and Shem, Cham, Yafet, they were not Jewish. So they say that Melchizedek was Shem, and he uses the term El Elyon. Now, interestingly enough, I made comment that it spells in English God with the capital G, meaning Hashem, which would seem to be the implication. He's talking about Hashem, and that it's a term that's used only specifically by Melchizedek, nowhere else. Like I say, nowhere else in Tanakh. But this term, also keep in mind, he's not Jewish. It's possible he's referring to a lowercase g God. And not only that, maybe he's referring to the chief gods of all the Canaanite gods. In which case, it'd be very strange that Abraham would make reference to the Kel Elyon, would acknowledge Kel Elyon, he would give him Maaser. Something just would not seem right. So when it says El Elyon, like I say, maybe he was talking about his Canaanite god. So if that's the case, if it's a troublesome name or title, why did the Anshe Knesset HaGdolah, the men of the Great Assembly, who we're saying we're working with the assumption they're the ones that put together the majority of Shemona Esray, right? Why would they put that in here? Why would it be using this troublesome name of us? You don't have to have it at all. There are plenty of other names, appellations of Hashem that are not used in Shemona Esray. Because the end answer is that this usage of a name of Kel Elyon can also help us understand the meaning of the bracha and why we say Magen Avraham. We already talked about Rashi's concept of why we say Baruch Atah Hashem Magen Avraham. But why specifically Magen Avraham? Not just because it says Hashem Migen Tzavecha, we're going to see. But what happens is this is first and foremost, so obviously it has to be the name of Hashem. We have to be talking about Hashem, otherwise the Chachamim would never have included it in the Shemona Esrei. But why include it all? It's Hashem's name. Fine, Kel Elyon refers to God. But we're talking about a non-Jew who used it. So why are we doing that? We talked about it very, very long time ago. We talked about, I think, when we used the beginning of the Ashkenazi Siddurim, mostly we start with the word Matovu Alecha Yaakov, Mishkenotecha Yaakov, right? Israel. That how goodly are your tents, of Jacob. That's something Bilam HaRasha said, right? Bilam, one of the greatest, he was the greatest prophet on the level of Moshe Rabbeinu minus a little bit. And we use the words, start our day, start Ashkenazim at least, we'll start the day with praise of Bnei Yisrael by a non-Jew. We already talked about that a long time ago. And here again, we have at the beginning of Shemona Esrei, we're quoting the title of God that a non-Jew said. Why? Nowadays, we would use the term righteous Gentile. For example, you go to Yad Vashem, you'll know that there's a special section there for righteous Gentiles, those who helped us during World War II and before. Melchizedek represented the righteous Gentile. What he did was he taught, in a sense, and I use that in terms in quotes, he taught Avraham to appeal to Kel Elyon. We saw last week that we are defined sometimes by the nature of the character we turn to Hashem in. Whether you turn to Hashem as the Avraham persona, Yitzchak, Yaakov, no one has a one persona that they have the relationship with Hashem. It's obviously a mixture. But now we're putting into the mix Kel Elyon said by a non-Jew, a righteous Gentile. Why? Answer. Before we come before Hashem, actually back up one step. We said last week that the first paragraph is introducing two personas. One, Hashem. We're acknowledging Hashem, who Hashem is relative to us, and we're introducing ourselves to Hashem, that we are the descendants of those who served you, etc. In that mix, we're mentioning Kel Elyon. Why? Because before we can approach Hashem as a Jew, we approach Hashem as a human being. Melchizedek represented humanity. He represented human beings, non-Jews, Jews. And when if you can't pray as a human being, you can't pray as a Jew. What does that mean to pray as a human being? Now, there are certain things that we know that innately that God gave this world to all of humanity. We are part of the players on that stage, to kind of twist a little bit of a Shakespearean reference. And yes, Abraham was the first Jew, but just that fact that the Avot instituted prayer, that they instituted the idea of Shacharit, Mincha, and Arvit, means that they didn't just pray, though, just because they're Jews. It also means that they taught us how to pray, but that the human beings in general would turn to Hashem, that all human beings should have a relationship with Hashem. So we come to Hashem, so to speak, at the beginning of Shemona Esray, both in terms of as human, part of the human race, and then the special subset that were his special chosen children. And for that reason, we say that at the end of the bracha, according to some, Hashem, Magen Avraham. Why? Because not only because it says the word Magen in this particular, it says Migain, it's in PL, forget that. It says Migain, but nevertheless, it's also because, actually, let me come back to that in a second. I want to tell you something I heard beautifully years and years and years ago. It was in 1977, 77, I think. You take a look at this bracha here. And I'm if I don't tell you now, I'm gonna forget about it. And then we'll come back to the why it says Magen Avraham. Okay. Rav Meir Schlesinger was the Rosh Hashiva of Shalavim when I was learning there a long time ago. And before Rosh Hashanah, he gave us a shiur on Daven. Just let's look at Shemona Esray. And he said, take a look at these titles. He says like this. I could still hear him say, he says, Hakel, Hagadol, Hagibor, Hanora, El Elyon. These magnificent titles. He's the ones who gives, he's the powerful, the awesome, the most high, the mighty. Then it says, Gomel Chasadim Tovi. That doesn't fit. Why doesn't it fit? Because you're talking about these very lofty, lofty things. He's the great, he's the awesome, he's fantastic. Oh, and he also helps the little old lady cross the street. But it does fit, because that's what makes Hashem so awesome. Hashem relates to every human being at the level that's needed, and we're supposed to imitate God. We're supposed to be like Hashem. So while we have to recognize Hashem's greatness, we have to reflect it back in the way Hashem acts to us. And that means we have to be Balei Chesed. Okay, so let's come back to the question of why we say Baruch Atah Hashem, Magen Avraham. I will do this now for a little bit. After the story of Sodom, just after this whole series of the war between the 4 kings and the 5 kings and this discussion with Melchizedek, Hashem reassures Avraham Avinu, and he says, Anochi Magen Lach, I will protect you. Well, wait a second, that's a little backwards. Imagine someone now finishes their Miluim, and they come back from Gaza, and they come home, and the Ramatkal, the head of the army, comes and says, okay, I got your back. I'm going to watch over you. Well, you should have said that when I went into Gaza, not when I come out. So what does it mean that Hashem tells Avraham Avinu, Anochi Magen Alecha, Magen Lach, I will shield you. And he's telling him this after the battle. Chachamim say that it wasn't a matter of fear, that Avraham was not afraid. Rather, he had something of afterwards of anxiety. What does that mean? He thought, he was afraid that maybe in his battle, he killed someone who was innocent. People who maybe had merits, they shouldn't have been killed. But these thoughts didn't go through his head beforehand, only in retrospect. Why? Why is he thinking about this after the battle? Because when he went into fight, he knew he was doing the right thing. By the way, that's one of the reasons that we learn about history. That's one of the reasons we learn Tanakh, because these things repeat in history. It's happening right now, too. We're talking about people with all our differences that we had, and yet going into Gaza and doing this war that has to be done with this one unified focus of getting rid of Hamas, etc. So when he goes in this war between the 4 kings and the 5 kings, he goes in with a clear head. I know what I have to do, and I'm in the right. and we're going to take care of this. When he comes out is when he's concerned. He's got this anxiety. Now that it's all over, and he looks back at the battle, and he wonders, did he do everything right? Or did he mess up? So Melchizedek takes him to the International Criminal Justice Court. Of course, the world condemns him. UN condemns Abraham. It's the usual stuff. But whatever. So anyways, he's anxious. And it's under this setting, Hashem appears to him and says, Anochi magen lach. I am protecting you. What does that mean? The shield of Abraham, read the sentence I wrote down. The shield of Abraham is the shield of he who has nothing else to rely on but God himself. This was Abraham's discovery, and therefore we say Magen Abraham. What does it mean that Abraham discovered this? What is it talking about? We all sometimes go headstrong into something, whether it's a project or an activity, whatever it might be, or in this case, a war, with the intent that we are going to do the best we can at something. When it's all over, sometimes we look back at it and we think like, man, I don't know if this was the right thing, it wasn't the right thing, and we have doubts sometimes. Let's go to the extreme. Let's make it the same thing here. This person comes back from the war, comes back from Gaza or comes back from the north. They say, you know what? I don't know. Maybe I just did something wrong here. Then all we have at that moment is nothing to rely on except Hashem. And we have to, Hashem says, Anochi magen lach. I'm protecting you. Don't worry. I have your back. Even when it's all over, it's all said and done. And therefore, according to some opinions, we end this bracha, Baruch Ata Hashem, Magen Avraham, because it's at that time that Avraham learned and therefore is teaching us when you have nothing else to rely on. You always have to rely on Hashem, but especially when you're filled with anxiety, even after the fact, that you are aware that Hashem is protecting you as well. I'm going to just read again, I wrote down something like a little summary where we're holding right now before we continue this bracha. What lessons have we gotten so far? Okay, we've almost finished the first paragraph. There's certain lessons we've had. Number one, we address Hashem as a successor and continuation to the Avot, to the forefathers, and to our Jewish history. Number two, you are able to address Hashem as an individual who has to have his own unique personal relationship with God, as Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov did. You address Hashem as a lonely individual. You have nothing to rely on except Hashem. That's the relationship with God, like Abraham did. And Hashem is your shield, even when you're completely alone, as he was for Abraham. And therefore we say, Magen Avraham. I want to go back now into this bracha. Let's take a look again at the center part of this bracha. And look at some of the words. Here you have, actually, I'm going to make this so it's a little bit easier to focus. Okay, I'm going to focus on this section. I did it backwards. Heck. It's a good thing it's not my first night teaching. Throw me out. Okay. Okay, I'm going to focus again on this series of words. Why those words? Why those titles? I mean, it doesn't say Shakai, it doesn't say Tzvaot, it doesn't say Elokim, it says, right? It says Kael, it doesn't say Elokim, it does say Elokeinu already. So this is based on, we're going to take a look at a Gemara. Okay. I'm going to make this big. I got this out of a book. I tried, by the way, putting things together. I realized I have a safe that probably has all in one place, which I did. Move this down. This has to do with a Gemara that's found in Masechet Yoma. And let me go through this. I'm going to read and explain. Part of this is explanation. Part of this is translation. I'm going to read this. Now, it says, Hakel, Hagadol, Hagibor, Vahanora. I'm starting at the top of the screen. I'm going to read it and I will translate. Habracha kolelet mispar ta'arim la'Hashem. This bracha that we're working on right now includes many titles, descriptors of God, which are taken from the pasuk in Dvarim, where it says, Hashem Elokechem, Elokei Elokim, Adonai Adonim, Hakel, Hagadol, Hagibor, Vahanora, etc., etc. Okay, so we know already that the words that we use in Shemona Esray, Hakel, Hagadol, Hagibor, Vahanora, actually come right from a pasuk in Dvarim. Then it says, Hemshech HaBaracha, the continuation of the bracha is, Gomel chasadim tovim, u'lemaaseh hemshech hapsukim, is really, when you think about it, is really just a continuation of this pasuk. Why? What does it mean when you say Hakel Gadol Gibor? What does he do? First, he can't be bought off. Secondly, he works. He takes care of the yatomim, the orphans and the widows. Ohevet ger. He loves the convert. Latet lo lechem b'simla, to give him food and clothing. So this pasuk includes not only the titles that we use in Shemona Esray, Hakel Gadol Gibor Madara, descriptors, but it also includes this idea when we say Gomel Chasadim Tovim, he does great acts of chesed. That's part of that pasuk also. Chachamim asku b'she'ela. The Chachamim dealt with the question. Can you really describe God with words? Because any description we use ultimately is just using something that is finite to describe the infinite. In other words, if I say, here's a bottle of water, I say it's X amount of centimeters, it can hold X amount of volume, it weighs X amount, that's simple. I could do that. But now I'm going to say to you, okay, I want you to describe your soul. Now, assuming if you don't know Tanya backwards and forwards and off the tip of your tongue, it's going to take you words that you're going to use to describe something that's spiritual. And it's going to be very hard for you to describe what the soul is. If I describe, here's one of the ways that I've heard used, is try to describe to a person who's been blind since birth the concept of color, right? Very difficult. Explain the difference between red and blue and yellow and green. So you're trying to use words to describe God. So it says, again, they raise the question, is it really possible to describe the Ein Sof, meaning the infinite, with finite words? Therefore, you have in this section of Shemona Esray words that the Torah itself used, and you can't add to them. In other words, a person is not allowed to add to the Shemona Esray because he thinks, wow, it's cool. I love these titles. I'm going to add some more titles. And it brings a proof from the Gemara. Here it's in Megillah. Amar Chazan. If the Chazan were to say, Hakel Gadol Gibor Hadir Chazak veHamitz, or sorry, in this case, he did say it. Amarle. So Chazak means he's Adir, he's fabulous, he's strong, he's courageous. Amarle. So they said to the Chazan who added these words, Siamtina l'shavchei demarech. Did you finish giving all the possible praise to God? Hashta hanitralta ilavde katvinu Moshe ve'oraita v'atu knesset hagdola v'taknihu. These words, Hakel, Hagadol, Hagibor, had Hashem not written it in the Torah, and the Anshe Knesset Hagdola had not included in our davening, Anan lo aminu lahu. We wouldn't have even said those. Atamar kuli hai. And you went ahead and added a list of all these other titles. Skip down here. Mashal Adam. This is like comparable or a parable to a man. Shayul elef alfei alafim dinarei zahav. Someone had tens of thousands, thousands upon thousands of gold coins. And what did they do? They said, wow, he has such great silver. Isn't that like a slap in the face? Now we're going to come to the Gemara I was referring to before, Masechet Yoma. And by the way, Masechet Yoma, which means Hayom, or the day, it's referring to specifically Yom Kippur. Okay, Masechet Yoma says, Dana Gemara b'sheila zo. Gemara discusses this issue of taking out words, adding words when it comes to describing God. And the Gemara really says, it discusses the idea of maybe even making the descriptors of God even a shorter list in Tefillah. So relative to the three descriptors, which is really more, it's Hakel, Hagadol, Hagibor, HaTorah, that's four, that Moshe used. The Gemara brings other quotes from other Nevi'im, other prophets. For example, the Navi Yirmiyahu, Shechiseret HaTorah HaNorah. Yirmiyahu said, you know what, we're not going to call God Norah. Why? He says as follows. The pasuk says, he said that, Hashem Tzakot Shemo. He says he took out one word. He took out the word Norah when he was describing God. Why? Yirmiyahu ben Dor HaChurban. Yirmiyahu lived at the time of the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash. Ra'at Yerushalayim bechurbanah. He saw Jerusalem in its destructive state. V'amar, he said, Nachrim ekarkarim mehechalo. non-Jews are doing somersaults in the Beit HaMikdash where it stood. Where is his awesomeness? So therefore, lo amar nora. So he dropped the word nora. Daniel, and Daniel the prophet, Hishmita Tator HaGibor. He cut out the word Gibor. He referred to him as Akel HaGadol HaNorah in this pasuk over here. Why? Koshi HaGalut Shera Daniel. The difficulty of the Galut we're talking about between first and second temple. According to the Gemara, is the reason that Daniel said, "Where's your gvura? Where's your strength, your might?" He left that description out. The conclusion of the Gemara is that we, when it comes to Shemona Esrei, we need to return to the original words that Moshe used. It is the original, most exacting words. Now, it says that based on this, remember I told you that the Anshe Knesset HaGdolah were the ones who established Shemona Esrei, the way that we really say Shemona Esrei. One of the things the Gemara says is, why would they call the Anshe Knesset HaGdolah? Well, so you say Anshe Knesset. Anshe Knesset HaChachamim. Why HaGdolah? What was so great about them? That says, they returned the crown to its old original place. What is it that they did? We saw that Nehemiah took out a description of God. We saw that Daniel took out a description. We saw another one. All these are starting to remove. And they said, nope, we need to keep that in the Shemona Esrei. We need to have that in there. And therefore, just from that alone, according to some opinions, that's why they're called the Anshe Knesset HaGdolah, the main of the great assembly. What made them great was that they were able to, that they made the decision to go back to the original Nusach. Interesting perspective of the word El Elyon. Now we talked about before about Malkit Tzedek, El Elyon, and all that. Now I'm going to go into another concept in this El Elyon. And by the way, we are not going to go through every single word in Shemona Esrei. It may look like it, may sound like it. I don't want to scare everyone off. But there's certain parts of Shemona Esrei we have to really cut deeply into certain sections because they're basic. So an El Elyon, Rabbi Eliyahu Dessler Zatzal, has a really interesting perspective. What does it mean? Just say again, El. We know that that's one of God's names, which means power. What do you mean El Elyon? Again, putting aside what we talked about before. He said like this. He wrote a book called Michtav Me'Eliyahu, Rabbi Eliyahu Dessler, who's relatively recent into the 20th century. And he said like this. He said, picture you have, and it's easy to picture because it's happening right now. You have bad guys. You have thousands of soldiers, and they have swords, and they have spears, and they have chariots. And one plane comes from above, one bomb, and wipes them out. We do that. We're doing that daily. Baruch Hashem. We're getting lots and lots of bad guys, right? You can run. Literally, you can run, but you can't hide. There's no contest, he says of Dessler. You have all this might. You have the horses, and you can have the swords. You can have it, but all you need is Hashem from above to drop his quote bomb, and that's it. It's all over. So we refer to Hashem as the Kel Elyon, who's on high, right? So that's one of the meanings behind Kel Elyon. Then we talk about Hashem as Gomel Chasadim Tovim. What is Gomel? It means either to pay out or to provide, and not in response to any previous action. Meaning, it's something that Hashem did freely without saying, "Oh, they did X, therefore they're going to get rewarded with Y." We use the term gemul in modern Hebrew when it comes to work, it comes to schools, and for certain things. But we also know we bench gomel, right? What does it mean? Gomel l'chayavim tovot shegamalani kol tov. What does that mean when someone benches gomel? Make the bracha gomel l'chayavim tovot. A gomel means that Hashem bestows upon the person a gomel l'chayavim, someone who is chayav, means they deserve to have something happen, tovot, but they still get some tova. They get something good. So in the case of the bracha of hagomel and gomel chasadim tovim, Hashem does chesed with people, not based on any reward, Just Hashem gives chesed freely. That's what the word here, gomel. We're going to have to come to, we will, not tonight. We're going to come to, maybe, we're going to come to, what does it mean, chasadim tovim? Why just chesed is chesed? Why do we have to identify it as being tov, good? That's a question we're going to put off to the side for a minute. So why is this mentioned in connection to the words Vikonei Hakol? By the way, just as an aside, Ashkenazim and Nusach Sfarad say Vikonei Hakol, and Adot Mizrach says Konei Hakol without the vav. But why is this? It says Gomel Chasadim Tovim Vikonei Hakol. That Hashem is the Gomel Chesed. He freely does Chesed, and He created everything. What's the connection between those two statements? Because the actual creation of the world itself was an act of pure chesed. Why? It wasn't in reaction to anything because there was nothing. It's not because there was people that were doing things. God said, okay, now I'm going to create a world for them to live on. It's not because there was something happening and therefore Hashem says, okay, the reward is a world. I'll do a chesed with them. Let's do this. He says to his malachim, I'm going to create a world for these people that are out there. Now they can walk and stand and float somewhere in space. So there's no space, there's no people, there's nothing. And again, it's impossible for us to understand what that even means, that there was nothing. Because we're used to a concept of space and time. This is beyond our comprehension. But in any case, the creation of the world is the ultimate chesed. That was done not just a chesed, but of gemul, completely with no reward for anything. He acts because he promised the world, so to speak, the Jews, that this would come to an existence. But the creation of the world, like I say, was sorry, I said something out of turn there, right? Every other act Hashem does, most acts, many of the acts Hashem does, is this Gomel Chasadim Tovim, and some of them are because he's doing chesed for something that people deserve. But this is 100% in a response to nothing, because there was nothing, and therefore it was pure giving and pure chesed on Hashem's part. This leads to the topic of what's called chesed shel emet. Chesed shel emet is when you do something for someone who passed away. It's natural. Let's say Joe Schmo's father passed away, he's sitting Shiva, and someone makes a meal for them. And then that someone who made the meal, a few months later, a year later, they lost their parent. They may think, look, I was part of the meal train for Joe's family. I imagine Joe should be nice and, give me something back. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. That's not against halacha, but you did an action, and maybe in the back of your head, you were expecting maybe there'll be some payback for it. But when it comes to doing tahara, cleaning the body before it's buried, the actual burial, just going to the levaya, going to the funeral, all that's act of what's called chesed shel emet. A chesed that's pure. It's true chesed because you can't get a repayment for it. And that's what Hashem did. Again, the other end of the spectrum, creation, which was again in response to absolutely nothing. We then mention also chasdei avot. Chasdei avot means the chesed of our forefathers. The common denominator of the Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov was chesed. Even though we say that Avraham Yagel Yitzchak and Yaakov Vanav Yaakov, no, that's not the pasuk I want from Mincha. We talk about chesed l'Avraham. The chesed l'Avraham. We identify Avraham more with chesed. Nevertheless, the chesed is something that runs all through as a what's called the common denominator, mechaneh mishutaf, or a common denominator to all of the avot. Because of that, they're also referred to as Hasidim. Not again Hasidim from a modern term, nor from the time of the 1700s, the time of Baal Shem Tov, but mean pure acts of chesed. That's who they were. And Mevi Goel Livnei V'neihem, brings Geula, the children of the children. There's a little problem with that statement. Let's take a look at it again. And this problem will show up, and I say problem in quotes, will show up multiple times in Shemona, right? Let's just take a look. Make it small so it fits. The fact that Hashem is Gomel Chasadim, that he does acts of chesed, and that he is the one who creates. That word kone also means not only he created, but he owns everything, in present tense. So Avot, he recalls and quotes the chesed of the forefathers, but this one being in present tense, Mevi goel livnei b'nei, he brings geula to his children's children for his namesake. I mean, I don't know about you, but I haven't seen any geula yet. I don't see a redemption. So that brings us to a famous Gemara, Gemara in Talmud Yerushalmi, but it's also a midrash, I think, in Tehillim. And Rav Kook Zatzal is famous for making this famous. Rabbi Shimon ben Chalafta, Abu Mahalchim Bahada Bika Arbel, Bekritzta. So these gentlemen were walking in Arbel. For those of you know where the Arbel is, up far, far north. They're walking in the valley of Arbel at the time of dawn. They saw the crack of dawn. Shebaka ora. That's light burst forth. Like again, if you've seen dawn, which I'm sure many of you have, it's absolutely magnificent. And they saw that. Amar Rabbi Chia Rabba Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Chia Rabba said to Rabbi Shimon ben Chalafta, Kach hi geulatan shel Yisrael. This, what we're looking at, this dawn that then becomes a sunrise, is similar to what the Geulah, the redemption of Bnei Yisrael is. Bitchila kima kima. This is the phrase that you will hear often quoted by Rav Kook in many of his writings. It sounds like I know what he says. I don't in most cases, but it's nice to say it and quote him. That at first the Geulah comes kima kima, slowly, slowly. But what happens is it gets stronger and stronger. If you've ever been outside watching the dawn break and leading towards sunrise, it's very small, right? We see this little ribbon of light and a little bit more, a little bit more. And then when the sun finally does pop over the horizon, it's really bright. So he says it starts off slowly, but then by the time it really starts, it comes in tremendous amount. And we talked about this also when we said that Hashem, why does Hashem, what do you mean he brings light with rachamim? He brings light in the morning with mercy, because if you're in a pitch dark room and all of a sudden, boom, the lights go on, it's like, oh, you can't even see. So Hashem does everything with rachamim, with mercy, including bringing the light in the morning. And this is now not that topic. This is just using the same growth of the light. The things come kima, kima. They were always somewhere on the path to the Geulah. And this is what some say, that when we say in Shemona Esray, Umevi goel livnei b'nei, Hashem brings, not yavi, not will bring, but mevi, he brings in present tense. And again, this is going to be an issue that comes up multiple times in Shemona Esray, where it sounds like it should be future tense, but it's in present tense, is that there's every day is another step, hopefully closer to that Geulah. And if you go back to, let's say, 1700s, it looked very, very far away. And you come back into 2024, Tafshin Pei Dal, which is what we're in right now, it looks like the sun is just about to pop over that horizon. B'ezrat Hashem. Okay, we are going to stop here. A few other things to do with the next line, Laman Shemo B'Ahava. So next week, let me just look at my notes. Next week, we'll probably finish this bracha of Shemona Esray, and then go into the next bracha and start presenting some more questions. Have a wonderful evening. A continued refuah shlema to the ill, and let's get our chatufim back, end this war, destroy Hamas, and we'll all have a good day. By the way, the day we do destroy Hamas, Kiddush is on me. I'll actually buy a bottle of schnapps. Be the first one I have in my house. Okay, everyone have a good evening. Thank you very much. Bye. Bye-bye.